The Lies They Told Us, a Creepy Conceptions original. Artwork by Kanarushi. Part 2. What I didn't expect was to crash straight through what I previously thought was the solid rock face and find myself hanging from my rappel on the opposite side of it, inside of the mountain itself. I struggled to orient myself as I hung horizontally, attempting to observe my surroundings as I quickly realized my consciousness was fading. I attempted to reach for the oxygen tubing, but it was no longer there. What I saw was a vegetable farm with many colorful plants sitting inside bins of water underneath bright lights. I thought I saw a figure approach, but I felt a sort of numbness spreading throughout my body. There was movement and loud noises. I felt dizzy. Then I woke up inside of what looked like a fish tank. It was comfortable as far as climate went. I was sitting in a chair, but not strapped to it. The fish tank was inside of a cut in the rock. In front of me was a screen, like a very small tablet or reader. It was blank as far as I could tell, but beyond the glass, beyond it was the blurred image of beings that I had never expected to encounter, and that I was sure had been extinct for centuries. But no, they were here, and they were... I sat still. I had never been more terrified in my life, and I was at least glad that I was wearing special gear as I relieved myself inside my suit. I'm not ashamed of this, I was justifiably petrified. Suddenly, the screen came to life in front of me. An artificial voice spoke. "State your purpose." I stared at it. I could barely breathe properly, let alone form sounds into comprehensible language. "Take your time," it added, and I was briefly thankful toward my captors before the reality of the situation hit me once more.
I'm sorry. I'll leave. I won't tell anyone. I'm sorry.
My breaths were coming in gasps. I wasn't wearing my tank. I was surprised to be conscious. I understood that this was probably a pressurized chamber. "What did you seek here?"
Ancient tools? I don't know. Evidence of a crash landing? Please, I didn't know you'd still be alive. I thought I was just going to find some pieces of metal or something. I won't tell anyone, please. And even if I did, I'm just a chef. An alien conspiracy theory fanatic. No one would ever believe me. They'd just think I was some lunatic. Please, I'm just a chef.
Nothing like the threat of imminent death to restore your will to live, with interest. "We do not wish to harm you." I was shaking.
Experiments?
There was silence.
What do you want me to do? I just want to go home. I'll do anything.
"We simply want to understand your purpose."
I was curious.
I shouted in desperation.
I wanted to see if I could find something, but I didn't think you were still alive. I wanted to prove to myself that you were real. I went through a tough time. I used to obsess about you. I thought this was a good time to explore.
My shaking turned to small quivers. The glass in front of me suddenly lost its opacity, and I saw the beings clearly. They were ugly. Their fur was patchy and the lengths badly managed. They had a bony prominence in the center of their faces that I could only describe as being in the shape of a ski ramp with nostrils underneath, pointing to the ground. They were mostly covered in white clothing that I doubted was made from animal skins. They looked soft and woven. Their sizes varied, but in my frightened state, even the smaller ones seemed massive. One of the beings stepped through a door in the glass, and that's when I realized that there were two glass doors that had some space in between them. This fish tank prison was probably made for people, and glass was probably meant to protect us from the harsh sound of their speech. The being sat in his face for several minutes, likely adjusting to the pressure changes, before stepping into where I was. I again trembled, but I couldn't help but gaze at this being. I can't even adequately describe it. Their hands had a two-finger difference. It wasn't speaking, and it wasn't creating large, thunderous sounds, but it wasn't quiet in the slightest. In fact, I could hear this being's entire body vibrate with an audible hum. This sound was interrupted by a rhythmic and unending thumping sound. "Are you satisfied?" the tablet asked. This being was smaller than I had imagined. It had fur on its face, mouth, nostrils, eyes, head. The rest of its body was covered. The being was slender. The skin was a reddish brown underneath the fur. "Ito Men, aged 31, owner of the art of Ito, professional chef and gastronomer. You teach classes, your sister is a programmer, and you are enthusiastic about astronomy, the possibility of life on other planets, and whether the government is hiding something."
Which they are. I was right.
I paused.
How did you know so much about me?
"We have your backpack and identification tags. We entered your name into a basic search engine." I felt dumb. Of course. My tension was starting to ease, but the combination of my predicament with the humming creature before me made me feel as if I were going to vomit. "Please place your palm on the scanner." The screen in front of me lit up, and as terrified as I was, I placed an unsteady hand on the screen, the threat of the creature looming before me. "Adequate oxygen saturation detected. If you would like a tour of our settlement, we will provide you a mask and allow for your adjustment in the depressurization chamber." I balked. That's it. I'm dreaming. I'm hanging off the side of a cliff and I'm unconscious. That's the only explanation for this bizarre situation. Why else would the aliens, the ones that hid from society for so long that people doubted their existence, give me a tour of their mountain hideout? "I sense your surprise. You stated that you would not speak of our existence or location. After your tour, you won't want to. It's the only way to guarantee both our anonymity and your protection." The monotonous voice made no sense. As scared as I was, if I got out of here, I would tell somebody eventually. If they let me out, I knew they wouldn't leave their hideout to come chase me. What on earth could they show me to make me keep their secrets? Still, I was worried I would never make it out of here alive, and having my phone and all other electronic devices taken from me troubled me almost as much as waking up in a fish tank the aliens built for you. Since I felt like I had no choice, I agreed. Soon, I stepped outside to see the assortment of creatures. Some had more fur, some had less. Their heights varied, but it was no more than a foot or so away from my own. Another being approached me. The tablet followed. "Take this drink for relaxation. You are under severe stress and will not absorb the information we need to share with you." I didn't hesitate on taking the drink. If the aliens wanted me dead, I would be dead. If they didn't understand my people's physiology, they wouldn't have built the fish tank or be able to understand my ideal oxygen saturation levels. It was flavorless. I could hear the hum and thumping of the creatures, all seemingly singing out of sequence. It took no more than 15 minutes for the relaxation to take full effect. It was an interesting feeling to know that you would have certain emotional responses to a situation, yet not have them produce the physiological reactions known as feelings. It isn't very pleasant, but in that moment, it was better than the other options. The cave walls around me narrowed into a short tunnel that opened into a brightly lit area ahead. When we emerged on the other side, I saw a vast room, at least half a kilometer in length and 13 meters wide. The cave walls were no longer visible. Instead, what looked like marble tiles lined the walls and ceilings. On either end of the room were identical wide staircases that disappeared before I could see where they led to. The walls on either side of the room were concave in nature, giving the room itself an elongated, squashed shape. 4 round metal and glass cylinders were equally spaced down the center of the room, from floor to ceiling, and I immediately recognized them as elevators. The tablet informed me to fully shut my helmet, which had an outside attachment to the oxygen mask that still covered my face. I could no longer hear the hum of the creatures with my weatherproof helmet. I was directed to an elevator where I crowded in with the creatures. I guess I should mention that there were 5 of them, of varying shapes and sizes, no masks, all wearing simple cotton clothing. The trip was an ascent, and I was led back to the room where I had made my clumsy entrance. It was connected to a system of tunnels that spread out into one of the most well-organized farming buildings I had ever seen. If we had this level of organization, we could probably cure hunger worldwide, but I doubted we could have this level of cooperation among our people. Every room was in some sort of squashed ball shape with several rows of different kinds of plants. They were temperature controlled by tablets that sat in the front of each row. A few creatures had a large machine assisting them as they repaired the single panel I crashed through a couple of hours ago. Apparently, they were made to come off one by one if anything were to happen, lest some large force bring the entire mountain face crashing inward. Many had rappelled down the cliff before, but none had crashed their entire body weight at the precise corner that would dislodge the panel. Lucky me. We have a system of farming here that can provide each of us with the proper nutrition and an excess for storage. This is Pod 1. Pod 5 houses the plants that grow our clothing, which is made of cotton.
May I get a closer look?
I asked, remembering that they may not hear me through the mask. Then I realized that I could hear the tablet just fine. The oxygen mask, I noticed, likely had speakers and receivers for speech. Yes. I leaned down near a specific row that had glass panels underneath instead of metallic ones. Inside, I could see various aquatic animals swiftly moving around. It's a complete ecosystem, just like the ones that supply your restaurant. I nodded, wondering if they had gotten the technology from us, or if we had gotten it from them. The tour continued, with most of the creatures ignoring me. Another network of connected hubs showed creatures of increasing sizes sitting in circles around a large creature, with the ones of the smallest sizes in the first pod.
Is this a school?
I asked. Yes, the tablet stated simply. I was shown research facilities, manufacturing plants, communications hubs, recreational hubs, living quarters. The underground city has restaurants, musicians, and surveillance systems. There were hubs with several screens. The tablet informed me that the creatures kept tabs on us at all times so that they could know what was going on with the world. I saw some surveillance footage of the complex we were in. Then I saw surveillance footage that seemed to be in a facility that looked very different from the one I was in. This isn't the only civilization. There are bases around the world. We only know of the ones that are able to communicate with us. Wow, so there were more crash landing sites, not just this one. I had heard that there were more sites, but this is the only one that seemed plausible to me. I guess that it made sense that there would be more than one ship sent to investigate our planet. Or maybe they were trying to populate it. I asked how long this took to build and was told that it was already here before their arrival. An old military base, they said. They'd expanded it continuously ever since, but had no idea how long the original building took to make. Before I could ask more questions, I was taken to another area that had many different, larger pods. These pods, they simulated the outside. Odd-looking trees, grasses, plants, and wildlife were seen walking, eating, running, and playing. Beasts of burden were being trained by one of the large creatures. In another room, a tiny creature escaped and came running towards me. I was immediately told to stand still and pay the creature no attention, but I felt tiny paws nudge my shin before another creature grumbled something and the paws left me, the tiny animal bounding back to its master. I had so many questions. I was directed to approach a medium-sized beast of burden. It was brown and covered in fur. It had a tail and a mask covering its face. The mask was removed, and I saw eyes looking at me curiously. "Put your hand out in front of you," the tablet directed. I did, and the beast pressed its ugly, great head against my palm softly. I caressed its furry cheek. A small being touched the hand that hung by my side. It showed me to place a small white rock on my palm and hold it upward to the beast. I did, and the beast promptly ate it, grabbing it gently from my hand before crushing it between horrifically sharp teeth. This beast that crushed the cave rocks also used the same face to interact with me in such a delicate way that I asked the tablet if it was also sentient. The tablet stated that depended on my definition of the word, but also told me that the creature's cognitive capabilities differed from our own in ways that did not allow it to form written language or decode those of another, and I understood. At the end of the tour, I was led to a small room where I could eat alone. I was told that the plants were grown at the compound and chosen for compatibility with my species, and that it was made to suit my palate. The amount of hunger I had made it more than decent. I was given another emotion-numbing shot, and I was planning on not taking it until I realized that the being would not leave until I had. Throughout this time, the tablet played several videos of the beings on their home planet, making odd sounds, growing, embracing one another. Words appeared at the top to describe the sounds, most of which sounded like harsh grunts and growls to me. Light-hearted conversation. Cries of a baby. Laughter of adults. Songs from a choir of children. All of it was harsh and difficult to distinguish. I wondered how they could discern one sound from another. The tablet told me that they had senses that we did not, and that some of our senses were powerful enough to not need them. They told me one of their senses were much more powerful than our own, and that one of ours was much more powerful than theirs. I was led into what looked like a conference room and sat on a chair. The beings were not all that different to me in size, so the chair was rather comfortable to me. The tablet sat at the oval table, facing me. Each of the original 5 beings also had a tablet that faced them, equally spaced in front of me as I sat at its end. Obvious translating devices. I was asked if I had any questions before they began. I thought about the information I had already been able to deduce. This wasn't the only grouping of beings, and they had contact with other groupings. As far as I could tell, their intentions were not to take over the planet, but I couldn't be sure of this. They were much larger, more populous, more organized, and more technologically advanced than I could have imagined. They knew what we ate, our medicine, our biology. They had their own hospitals and pharmacies and were able to develop food for me to eat that, though tasting odd, was not as unappetizing as I had imagined. They were also able to hack into many systems' files and make stocks of medications for my species for occasions such as this one. I was welcomed by their beasts, and they seemed to touch something inside of me that I was sure would reveal itself once my emotions were no longer dulled. I wondered why I even needed the second dose in the first place. I was already confident that the beings had no intentions of hurting me. Were they to tell me that I couldn't leave? What did I even have to go home to? I asked them their names, and after a series of grunts and garbles were given, one of the beings told me they found my reaction humorous and that they were laughing. I wanted to laugh with them, but found that the medicine was starting to numb me further. I told them this, and they commented that it was normal. I decided on my first real question.
Do any of our governments know about you?
I asked. A select few from each region. However, we have no contact with them. Each successor is told of an existence of files, some that they are to read over immediately, and others only to be accessed under severe circumstances.
You've seen these files?
The being to the right of me nodded, and I found it interesting that we shared a head movement that meant the same thing. I guess this creature was the one responding to me at this moment. I saw its lips move. We have incredible programmers. We also know where to look. Your governments don't know of our sophistication, but they know of our desire to stay hidden, and they match that desire. They do know we have technology. I wasn't sure why it was so important to keep this marvelous thing a secret. Maybe we could even learn from these beings and collaborate. Reverse engineer their ancient technologies to be able to do interplanetary travel. I mean, didn't they want to go back to their home world? Did they even have a home world to go back to? All of the videos I was shown were of beings laughing and playing outside, not in caves inside of mountains. I even saw them on the ocean, at sea level. Why stay confined to this cave?
Was your home planet destroyed?
There was a long pause, the first hesitation I had sensed from the beings. Yes, said the one to my immediate left. But it has been rebuilt. I thought for a moment. Obviously, they had a means of communication if they were able to know their world had been rebuilt.
Have you ever thought of returning to your home planet? Are you able to?
Another long pause. Then, the one on my left spoke again. This is our home planet. I had trouble processing this. Something about its words made me dizzy. I asked it to repeat itself. We are the original beings of this planet. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed my story. Please remember to like if you like, comment, share, and subscribe. I will be putting out content on a regular basis, and I would love to know what my listeners are thinking. If you would like to submit a prompt request or a music request, you can email me at stories@creepyconceptions.com. I do write my own background music, which is free to use as long as you give me credit. If you would like to commission amazing artwork from the brilliant Kanarushi, you can email her at commissions@kanarushistudios.com. Thank you once again for joining us, and as always, stay creepy, my lovelies.